the name of the program is The Way to Go. I invite you to join me each week at this time as we explore places to go and things to do. Today's journey is into the realm of courthouses and a little side trip into famous trials that took place in them. My guest today is Laura Baldasare, who has a very good reason to be very knowledgeable about this subject. Laura, what is this fascination that people have with trials? What causes it?
Well, I think part of it is a human interest factor. We all seem to be interested with what goes on in other people's lives. And some of the trials and things that have happened both in the past and currently are fascinating. You know, it's different aspects of human nature at their best and at their worst and at their funniest and at their most tragic.
And the notoriety, I suppose, has a lot to do with it. Famous people, when they're involved, or famous situations, when you think about it, there's a program on television now called Court TV, and certainly people want to be there while it's happening as opposed to just seeing. And, of course, they're allowing cameras into the courtroom in so many cases.
I think that here and now aspect of it. You know, I notice sometimes, they're announcing the verdicts even on the radio now, live. And there have been times when I might not otherwise really be listening, and I know I have to get out of the car, and they're about to announce the verdict, and I don't even know what the case is. But somehow you feel compelled to stay there and hear what the verdict is. And it's that sort of, life happening right now feeling that I think attracts
And you
people.
got into this subject, you're not an attorney, but you got into this subject in a very interesting way because you're doing something in June that relates to this. Why don't we talk about that?
Okay, that would be great. I am by profession an event planner, and one of the things that I try to do for all of our events is look for the innovative and the creative and the different so that our clients are not doing the same old routine, but something very fresh and exciting. And we are doing an event for legal awareness of Westchester in June, and we were looking for something innovative that would tie in the law theme and tie in a lot of what the organization stands for. And the executive director had mentioned that it might be nice to somehow look at some of the courthouses in White Plains. And in looking at what this whole event should stand for, Westchester is all about beauty and history. I mean, those are two adjectives and words that I think really speak to the heart of some of what Westchester has to offer. So we had the mission of taking the law and taking the courthouses and taking history and taking beauty and mixing it up and coming up with something. And we began to do some research. I wanted to know a little bit about Westchester's history. When were things booming? When were things booming in a legal sense with the courthouses?
So as a party planner, you got into a historical society and into all sorts of research?
Archives and libraries and books and things that I might not otherwise ever have approached. And I'm so glad that we did, because we really unearthed some very exciting things, and there are parts of Westchester I won't look at the same way again.
So let's talk about the courthouses and in the area and where they are, whether they're still in existence, and some of the famous things that happened there.
Okay. Well, there are a number of them that can be visited today. Most of them that still exist are historic landmarks. And can be visited and have museums and all sorts of pieces of interest that can be seen there.
Such as?
Well, okay, such as one of the more notorious and very beautiful is the courthouse in Bedford, which was established in 1787, and it now houses the Bedford Historical Society, and there's also a museum there. And that had a very notorious, sensational trial in the late 18th century, which involved a gentleman by the name of Robert Matthews, which was his given name. He went by the name of Matthias the Prophet, and his contention was, or his feeling was, that he was the reincarnation of Matthias, who is the apostle who was chosen after the death of Judas to join the others, and he believed himself to be the reincarnation. And he was very much a zealot and believed in his mission, and he managed to bring a lot of other people along with him, followers. And what he uniquely did is he managed to get people to turn over their fortunes to him.
I was wondering how the trial would get into it.
Yeah, he wasn't only otherworldly, he was worldly as well. And a number of people did turn over their fortunes to him. and then mysteriously or turned over their fortunes that would revert to him after their death. And then they died. And there was one gentleman in particular who died, and a friend of his who was also a follower. The gentleman who died, his name was Elijah Pearson. Another gentleman who was a friend of Elijah Pearson's thought there was something a little bit suspicious about this and was ready to leave the fold, so to speak. And there was an attempt on his life and the life of his family as well by poison, which they survived because apparently the maid who was commissioned to put the poison in their coffee didn't do it quite right. So they ended up being very ill, but
this
they
is a true
survived.
story.
This is a true story. It's in the records. It doesn't sound like... See, this is what happens with some of these trials. You just can't believe that they're true. And they ended up okay, and they went and did go after Matthias the prophet.
What happened?
Well, he was brought to trial, and his arraignment was at the Bedford courthouse. And when you walk into the Bedford courthouse, as I think anyone should who might have an interest in history and in landmarks, it's a beautiful old building, and the architecture is very much of the period. And I believe that if you walk in and you know this story, you can hear and you can feel, because I think buildings and walls have some of the character of what happened there within them. He was... It was a very sensational trial. He was very verbal. He came in very flamboyantly dressed. It was purple cape, the description reads, and silver stars over him, and just all different colors and all different, a colorful character, definitely, both literally and figuratively. And he was subsequently tried in a very long trial and found guilty of the death of Elijah Pearson. And you can feel that, I think, when you go into some of these buildings. You can feel the ghosts.
Are you going to do something in this program that you're doing in June on that trial? Are you going to reconstruct that trial?
We're not going to do that trial because the time period that we decided to focus on was the 20s. Mm-hmm. Westchester was very happening in the 20s. We had a lot of things going on here, a lot of things that in retrospect have some humor attached to them and lend themselves very well to the type of event we're doing. We're going to recreate some of the types of characters that lived during that time and some of the issues that some of their trials dealt with. Dutch Schultz, who was a very famous gangster, lived actually in Bronxville in one of the buildings that's now on Concordia College campus. He and his showgirl wife and children lived a very quiet life there. But he also had a lot to do with stealing liquor for during Prohibition. Westchester was not very good at obeying the laws of Prohibition, I must say. There were a lot of speakeasies throughout Westchester, a lot of them. And he basically had a still in his home, and he made beer and managed to run hoses throughout the sewer system in Yonkers into the speakeasies where the beer was distributed. One maintenance worker one day down in a manhole discovered some of these hoses and blew the whistle, and apparently a great deal of beer was let loose into the Nepperhan River before this whole case came to a head, no pun intended. And that was a very sensational trial.
The trial was held in White Plains?
Yes, it was, in the White Plains Courthouse. The White Plains Courthouses have a whole history unto themselves. There were a series of them, and in the 20s, it was a very beautiful building that was on the grounds of where A&S is today, of the Galleria. It was a very large complex of 5 buildings between Main Street and Martine, and that's where that trial was held. Also, another famous trial, a very sensational trial at the time in 1927, was between Daddy and Peaches. And Daddy was Edward Browning.
Peaches Browning. And
Peaches Browning, exactly. And that was a divorce case. Peaches was suing for $4,000 alimony, which was a huge sum. And it was a very, very sensational trial. everything about the Roaring Twenties and the flapper lifestyle and all of that was really very much there during that trial. The accounts say that there were traffic jams up and down Main Street in 1927 because people were coming, and that same human interest factor that we have today, they had in 1927 because they were there lining the courthouse to hear this sensational trial.
I guess it's true that nothing has changed.
I guess not. Nothing new under the sun, right?
There was another courthouse that has a little interesting history, also in White Plains, wasn't it?
Sure. The first one that was built actually in White Plains, money was given to build 2 courthouses in Westchester County around 1785, 1787. And they were coincidentally the Bedford Courthouse and also this first courthouse in White Plains, which is where the site of the present State Armory in White Plains.
Oh, yes, which is now a condo, I believe.
Right. Off South Broadway area. Right. And that was the first one in White Plains, and they did find some interesting things about that courthouse many years later. And by the way, both Aaron Burr and Alexander Hamilton tried cases in that courthouse, so it's a pity that it's not there anymore. But at any rate, they found that the jails were located on the bottom level of that courthouse. And they found tunnels leading from that bottom level into a tavern across the street.
When was that?
So, what they were doing was excavating for the building of Bonwit Teller in 1940. And that original courthouse actually burned down during the Battle of White Plains during the Revolutionary War. And, the courthouse was older, after the Revolutionary War, it burned down. And they erected a second courthouse, still never having found what was under there.
Really?
And then when they began building for
Bonwit
Teller, they found all of these tunnels leading and were able to put together the pieces.
It's interesting as we talk about these notorious trials. We have some books here that there's one particular book called New York Notorious, which is a tour of the city's most infamous crime scene. So obviously, there's a fascination in finding specific things and specific negative things that happened in our life. People like to do that. There are some special tours, as a matter of fact, that you can take that people run in various places, which will tour just places that have a reputation, perhaps not such a positive reputation.
Well, it's very interesting, and you're very right. There are several books here that talk about places to visit and interesting, different types of places that you might ordinarily pass by. And I love doing that sort of thing myself personally. And in looking at these books, the first one that I grabbed onto was New York Notorious.
This one isn't as notorious. This is the Movie Lover's Guide to New York, which tells about where things actually took place that movies were based on, where some of the famous people live, and also on where things were filmed. So there are a lot of special interests, and there are many, many books that, of course, for people who are interested in this area and finding places. Isn't it great? I'm sure you have the same experience. The best time is when someone who has never been to this area comes here, and you or I have the pleasure of taking them around and showing off the PepsiCo gardens or the places in New York. It's not true.
Even some of the places that you wouldn't normally go. In another lifetime in business, I had entertained someone from Chile who was here who had never been to Manhattan, and the first thought is to go to the Empire State Building, the World Trade Center, all of the landmarks. And we instead went to some very quiet places, a restaurant in Little Italy, a place here, a place there that's off the beaten track. Yes. And that was really a sense of what we're all about, too. Yes. There's a lot to be said for those types of discoveries.
Talking about off the beaten track, I just want to remind our audience that we're talking today with Laura Baldasare, who is a party planner and has gotten into the whole subject of trials and courthouses, and that's what we're discussing today. Let's go back to this theme party that you're running in June. The location, I think, is very interesting too. We haven't touched upon that,
which really is integral to the whole piece. We are going to be holding it in the Central Jury Room at the Westchester County Courthouse, which fit in very nicely. when I looked at that site and when I saw it's very awesome to walk into a large jury room like that. And I think you kind of are brought up to what a lot of this stands for. It's a very heartwarming kind of feeling. And this is a place that we have to use, that we have to do something here. And what will be happening is we will have characters in period, in costume, and in character, speaking with the guests as though it were the 1920s. We're going to have our flappers and our gangsters and our notorious criminals and our more fun characters. We're also going to stage a mock trial that will be pulling on some of the facts that we're unearthing as we're doing our research. So it should be great fun, and it very much speaks to doing that creative, innovative.
And it's in the interest of the people who are there, because the
Absolutely.
theme party could be done on something that relates to a company or an individual's interests.
Absolutely.
Or in some of the things that you have in your planning, people can think of parties that tie into some well-known event. Let's name a few of them.
Oh, well, I always say be creative, be imaginative. If you are sitting down and you want to plan an event and you have absolutely no idea of a reason to do it, there are books that can tell you on such and such a date this happened. On such and such a date, Alaska was made a state. Well, let's do an Alaskan heritage theme. On such and such a date, and I'm not going to be able to quote you all my dates right now, but on such and such a date, Roger Maris, had a record in hitting runs. Do a baseball theme. I mean, you can always find a reason. Just break loose and get a little imaginative and a little creative. And if you don't have a built-in reason, find one. By doing that.
Look in the almanac or an encyclopedia.
Absolutely. There are books that have famous dates when such and such happened. And you can get into trivia. You can get into, there's a date in, I think, August that's the date of the Pueblo corn dance. Well, what fun to do a Tex-Mex Southwestern kind of thing. And you also get to learn an awful lot about a lot of different things, because you make it a project and you begin to do some research to pull in, the food and the atmosphere and any music that should be a part of it. And
I can recall some things that I attended. Someone did some research on a specific day, going back on that specific day for 25 years, and played the music that was played at that time, read the headlines, talked about what shows were playing on Broadway, and all the things that related. Of course, what you learn by doing this year after year is that nothing changes.
Right. Right.
It was the same old world problems and the same old sports problems, and it was very interesting. Now, a couple of other things. I remember the Stouffer Hotel in Westchester ran a Chock-a-Frolic party where they had all the chocolate lovers come, and one year they ran a cruise to nowhere. Which was very interesting, because I happened to attend that one. And what happened was that they were going to actually take people on a boat out into Long Island Sound, and the weather was so bad they couldn't do it. So they quickly put together a shipwreck party.
I love it.
And some people from the hotel jumped into the pool in their uniforms and came in dripping wet into the party. So,
you have to be on your toes.
And then they tore up some sheets and said, go make costumes, and had a costume. So they improvised at the last minute. But we're digressing. And
but
I know you
they're
digress
fun stories,
in your Lorelei Productions and promotions, you call it?
Lorelei Productions.
Productions, and come up with all these things. But let's get back to courthouse. There's a very, very famous courthouse formerly a courthouse in Mount Vernon.
There is. It is St. Paul's, and it's actually a National Historic Site. St. Paul's Church, which is on Columbus Avenue in Mount Vernon. Very, very rich with history. After the Revolutionary War, we were without a courthouse for a time until that courthouse was built in White Plains, and it functioned as the county courthouse. Exactly. It is the oldest building existing that has this kind of judicial history to it. It is also the only, it's the National Bill of Rights Museum. And there were famous trials that went on during the time that spoke to, I believe, freedom of speech at that church.
And it's a place that very few people know about. I discovered it myself a couple of years ago, and it's just amazing. A wonderful little museum in there with great exhibits. There are hidden museums everywhere that people don't know about, of course.
Absolutely. I mean, I didn't know about this church at all, and I live right near Mount Vernon. I'm in Bronxville, so it's close. Never knew. And I'm finding that, too, as we've been delving into archives for this event, the historical societies, every town and village in Westchester County has a historical society, and they are very often in fabulous homes that are themselves landmarks. And almost anywhere you go, there are places and the things that sometimes you uncover that you don't expect at all are amazing. Just amazing.
You touched earlier in our discussion. You touched upon the fact that you like to discover places that are not as although the truth is that how many people who live in this area have gone to the top of the Empire State Building? But those are I certainly know when my out-of-town guests come in or out-of-country guests come in, they want to see the Empire State Building and the World Trade Center and Rockefeller Center and Times Square. Those are the things they've heard about.
Sure.
And the little things, after they've seen those, the little things are really the great finds that I think they treasure and take back with them.
I think so, too. And they're the things that, yes, the large landmarks, the large buildings, everyone reads about them and they want to see them. But my feeling is, as far as New York is concerned, if you want to really get a taste, it's like if you travel to Europe, you can see all the great sights in Rome. If you get in a car and drive off into the countryside, you begin to get a taste and a feel for what it's really all about. And that's what I found in New York. If you go off to some of these smaller places that have tremendous history associated with them, it brings it to a different level. And you really get a chance to, for example, I'll go back to this experience, going to a little place in Little Italy where people sat at long tables together and everybody mingled, and you had no chance of ordering your own dinner because the waiter was going to tell you what you were going to eat, and that was all there was to it. This man sat there and he was in heaven. He said, "This is wonderful. This is great." And he would not have taken that feeling about New York away with him. And I think that we have pockets throughout Westchester County, little places, little jewels and gems. And sometimes it means just keeping your eyes open as you're driving around and seeing signs and saying, "Gee, I wonder what that is." Sometime I'm going to take a stop and see. Or just there's so many books available, such as some of the ones that you have here.
Yeah, one of the books, and we have had the author on this program, is Nooks and Crannies, New York's Nooks and Crannies that David Yeadon wrote. David Yeadon has written 30 books or so and has been on this program several times. I discovered this book many years ago, and I think I visited every place in there by now. But it just takes you into the places that you're talking about right now that you don't know and you don't discover. But you can't find them yourself. People have often asked me, how do you find about these? How do you find out about these little places? And how do you find out about them?
Well, I read and I keep my eyes out and have books and keeping a book like this in the car. Again, in a past life when I was very involved in sales and on the road a lot, very often I find myself with a half an hour between appointments. And because I so much enjoy this type of thing, and I was in all different areas, I might be in Long Island and say, I have a half hour, let me see where I am and what might be here. And I happened upon one of George Washington's encampments during the war. Who knew that this was there? And I spent a very enjoyable 45 minutes wandering the grounds, in and out of tents. They had replicas set up of where the army would have been, and just who knew? And I think that it's such a wonderful experience to come upon these places. So I think it's reading, and I think it's being aware, and just kind of.
Yes, one of the great sources is the feature that appears every Sunday in the New York Times in the real estate section called Cityscapes, in which Christopher Gray, who's a architectural historian, goes in detail about someplace, a building that changed a lot or things are happening to it. And it's wonderful just to clip these and to take them with you when you're going to the city and say, well, look at this place. I never saw it. I passed it hundreds, maybe thousands of times and never saw it. And now you see so much of its history and its background and the change that are taking place. So I think you really summed it up when you said you have to read and you have to listen to people. And of course you have to want to do it. That has a lot to do with it.
And the rewards are wonderful. In Ossining, as a matter of fact, the Westchester Preservation Society, I believe it is, which is in an old house, an historic landmark, they're dedicated to educating people about the architecture and the landmarks that are throughout the area. And there's a museum, and you can go and you can learn, and you can make notes, mental notes and written notes of places to stop by and see as well. That's another resource that I've uncovered.
Yeah. Another thing that I've discovered is when I find something which I never heard about and happen upon, afterwards I read about it all the time. So it was there all along, but I never saw it before. And of course, that's part of that wonderful world of discovery. When do you find time to do all of this?
This is my passion. This is my love. That's really what it is. You know, it's an always happening thing.
You're a creative person, obviously, so you come up with a lot of ideas.
I guess so. You know, it's interesting. I went through the first half, if not two-thirds of my life, thinking I had no creativity, that wasn't my thing. And when I began doing event planning, everyone kept saying, my God, you're so creative. And I realized that it was just that I had found the right outlet for that creativity. And I think that people are more creative than they think.
Yeah, someone once said you are only limited by your imagination. And I think that has a lot to do with it, is if you say, the world is mine, and I can go in any direction, so what would I do if I could do it, and then try to do it, and then you can create the kind of event or party or research information.
Right.
And once you get into it, of course, you're so involved, right, that it becomes a part of your life.
Oh, sure. And that's exactly the approach that we take. I mean, we sit down and do a brainstorming session on any variety of themes and topics that we might be doing an event on, and we basically say, this is a wish time. Throw out all your ideas. I don't care how bizarre they sound or how far out they sound. Let's come up with something. And then you begin to say, okay, how can we maybe approach this? Maybe we can't get this high, but maybe we can get this close. And that's when the creativity starts happening, and people begin to feed on that energy. And
you're just a bundle of energy. And what you've done here is told us a lot of information, and I guess we've run out of time, so I thank you for coming.
My pleasure.
My guest today has been Laura Baldasare of Lorelei Productions, a very creative person who's talked to us about courthouses and trials and wonderful places to go. I'm Norman Liss. The name of the program is The Way to Go, and until next week at this time, enjoy yourself.